remember being woken up early in the morning by a hellacious barking.
It was 2009, 3 days before Halloween, a time when the boundaries between the living and the dead become blurred. Stephanie Poore said the dogs next door were going crazy.
And they were upset, and it was loud.
What'd you think to yourself when you were lying in bed listening to that?
Something was going on over there, and I wanted to get some more sleep, and I was going to have words with Mark.
Mark was Mark Stover, Stephanie's next-door neighbor and her boss. Stephanie was a dog trainer at Mark's facility in Anacortes, Washington, an island community about 80 miles north of Seattle. He had built a successful business working with the dogs of the rich and famous, and had earned the nickname the Dog Whisperer of the Pacific Northwest. That morning, Stephanie made her short commute to work. She assumed Mark had already left to meet a client in Seattle.
And I'm on the phone leaving a message with him, and he's in the driveway. The car is in the driveway, parked up by the house. And I'm thinking, wow, that's weird, because he's probably going to be, a little antsy because he would have rather been gone by now.
Mark had a reputation as a bit of a pit bull, intimidating and impatient.
I saw who I thought was Mark going into the house, coming out of the house, putting stuff in the back of the hatch.
Well, what made you think it was Mark?
Because it was his hat and his jacket. He opened the door to the car, looked at the front windshield, grabbed something off the front, and then just literally tore down the driveway.
Then Stephanie went up to the house to the bathroom. As she walked up the driveway, she saw tire marks from the car and some spots of blood on the gravel. Stephanie assumed that the blood belonged to Ding, Mark's guard dog. Ding recently had surgery.
I explained it away that Ding must have ripped her stitches out here.
The blood wasn't the only sign something was wrong.
I could smell the bleach before I even opened the door.
Stephanie stepped inside. She noticed a bedroom door that was usually never shut was closed. And as she went into the house, Stephanie saw 3 big spots on the floor.
Did they have a color?
It was blood. It was red, dark red.
Stephanie was worried. She kept calling Mark, but he never answered. Stephanie hoped the blood was from Ding's surgical wounds. She was doing her best to avoid imagining the worst. But the next morning, when she came back to work, she was startled to see Ding sitting by the back door.
She was on all fours and she was growling. Something had happened to her. Maybe she had had a stroke. It was obvious one eye was in a horrible mess. We couldn't find Mark. I was calling him. I left a message. Mark, we're really concerned. Where are you? Why is Ding here?
An unsettling feeling hit Stephanie.
I can only describe it as evil. Something horrible, something terrible. I knew something bad had taken place.
Stephanie called 911. Mark's new girlfriend had also called the police after not hearing from him. Soon after, sheriff's deputies arrived on scene. Investigators believed the bleach, the blood, and Mark's vanishing act all added up to one inescapable conclusion.
It was a cold-blooded murder.
But detectives had no idea they were about to step into a hall of mirrors where nothing was as it seemed.
I've never seen in my career a case that has as many twists and turns and mysteries as this case with Mark Stover.
They soon discovered a story tangled in obsession.
We don't have the truth yet. We have some of the truth, but we don't have all of it.
But who was the hunter and who was the hunted? I'm Peter Van Sant. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill. The Dog Trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard. Episode 1, Puppy Love. The coastline of Washington State, just north of Seattle, is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. Back in the 1800s, my ancestors were homesteaders on an island not far from Anacortes, Washington. It's gone now, but one of my great-greats even had a small apple orchard on Orcas Island. Anacortes is the gateway to the San Juan Islands, where ferry boats depart to these wooded jewels. I go hiking, swimming, and fishing for Dungeness crabs, and have always considered the small harbor towns here my gateway into tranquility and peace. That's why I was stunned when 48 Hours first got word about this murder. And then I learned that at the center of it all was a celebrity dog trainer.
Mark was known as the dog whisperer of Anacortes and the dog trainer to the stars.
That's Victoria Simmons, Mark Stover's younger sister. She said some of Mark's clients included Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, longtime Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, and Seattle Mariner Ichiro Suzuki.
I believe he came to love all dogs, and no pedigree or fabulous pedigree, it didn't matter to him. He saw value in all of them and potential in all of them.
Mark offered private training lessons. He could teach basic obedience, but his wealthiest clients wanted him to train their pets to become protection dogs. This is audio from a video of Mark training a dog. He's standing in what looks like a gravel driveway, wearing a dark raincoat and his trademark brown hat with a round brim.
Show me the motion again with the stick.
Well, this is the barrage.
A handler releases the dog. The dog sprints and bites hard enough to lock onto Mark's leg, which is covered in padding, and a tug of war ensues between the growling dog and Mark. Mark commands the dog to stand down. Right away, the dog lays on the ground, looking straight ahead, and awaits the next command.
I just thought he was so incredibly interesting.
His niece Julia, Victoria's daughter, said Mark sometimes expressed his love for dogs in eccentric ways.
You know, he has this beautiful Porsche 911 and a BMW, and then he has this car called the Dog-a-lac, the Cadillac. And I swear half the textile of the carpeting in that car was just dog hair that had woven itself into it.
She said it smelled horrible, but one day they went for a drive.
And instead of taking the Porsche or the BMW, he takes me in the Dog-a-lac. And he said he didn't want his neighbors to know how rich he was.
But Mark didn't start out rich at all. In fact, just the opposite. And his upbringing was far from easy.
Our family went through a series of losses early in our childhood, just seemed to be one after another.
This is Victoria again, Mark's sister. They grew up in the Seattle area in the 1950s and 1960s.
My father died when I was 6 months old and Mark was 18 months old. Then shortly after that, a half-brother was killed in a car wreck that was caused by my other half-brother, which was sad. And then mother remarried. And shortly after she remarried, my sister died of pneumonia. She was 9.
Their mother's second marriage also then fell apart.
And so she remarried again, and he was an alcoholic. Life at home was tough.
Mark struggled in school. According to Victoria, the family didn't know how to help him.
He got kicked out of high school for smoking dope. I think he was 16. Yeah, he was on a bad path.
And then their mother's third husband died of cancer.
We were broke. Our family was broke, and there was a funeral, and at the wake, and family friends brought a German Shepherd puppy for a gift at a wake, which is such an odd choice.
The German Shepherd puppy was named Gunter. While maybe odd, the gift would be a godsend.
I've never been able to talk to them and ask them what prompted them to do such an odd thing. But Mark and that dog bonded that very day.
Mark got in touch with the family's old vet. He encouraged Mark to join the Washington State Search and Rescue Canine Unit.
They trained him and taught him how to train Gunter, and he loved it. He was flown all over the country to look for lost people, as far as the Everglades. And it gave meaning to his life, gave purpose to his life. That dog saved him.
Mark eventually started to train dogs in private sessions where he'd go to people's homes. In a news article from 1981, Mark is described as a disciple of the famous behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner. Skinner studied how rewards and punishment can condition behavior in humans. Mark applied that to dogs by training them with punishment and reward.
He's told me that he was the first person to ever apply human psychology to dogs and to understanding the pack and how the pack works.
Was your brother an innovator in the dog world?
I believe he was.
As for cats, Mark was once quoted saying that he didn't like cats because he wants something he can control. He added, "Dogs are easy to change. It's people that are hard to change. See, I can't put a choke chain around them." Mark started training dogs in the 1970s, and by the 1980s was a well-established canine guru. Mark never married during that time. Then, in the early 90s, when Mark was nearing 40, a wealthy potential client called.
I was looking to do some training with my dog and found him in the phone book.
Linda Opdyke was the daughter of Wally Opdyke, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state of Washington.
I remember speaking with him on the phone, and I felt he was very arrogant, actually rubbed me the wrong way initially. Name dropped a lot of people and had quite a bit of an attitude, but yet he seemed also to know a fair amount about dogs, so I thought, let's try this out.
Mark and Linda met regularly to train her dog. A bond was starting to form.
I saw he definitely did have a connection with dogs, and I felt that he would be able to help us.
Mark definitely had a way with dogs, and at times he could be charismatic with people.
He was very bright and witty and charming.
After 8 or 9 months, their relationship evolved. And even though Linda was 12 years younger than Mark, his sister says Linda was his type.
She was tall, slender, beautiful. He seemed to like the girls from these wealthy families, which I always was wondered about. Just right down his alley.
For one of their first dates, Mark asked her to go fishing.
So I drove over and met him and did a day of fishing, and that began when we started dating shortly thereafter.
So what was the attraction?
You know, he was incredibly bright, eccentric, had a lot of similar interests in that I did.
Linda grew up camping, fishing, and hunting. They connected over a love for nature and the open air. What started purely as business turned personal, and they set out to build a relationship and a successful company at the same time. They were coming together despite being from two different worlds. While Mark's family had struggled, Linda Opdyke was the daughter of a millionaire.
I grew up with my family doing a lot of camping. On Whidbey Island, we have a small beach cabin up there, and I grew up saltwater fishing, salmon fishing. I was born in California and then moved when I was very young to Bellevue, Washington. I went to junior high and high school there, was very involved in horseback riding and competed doing Grand Prix jumping, and that was really my passion and where I spent my time in my youth.
How good were you at this horse jumping?
Well, it probably depends on who you'd ask.
And tell me also about your father. He's a famous man in the state of Washington, a very successful man in the state of Washington.
Yes, he started with, came from very middle-class background and went to University of Washington, and then really became involved in a lot of different businesses, one of them being Chateau Saint Michel, developing that. And
that's a very famous winery in Washington, sold all over the world.
Yes, it is. I'm very proud of his accomplishments that way. He was also involved in K2 Ski Company and Jan Sporting Goods and different businesses throughout his career.
Linda is her parents' only daughter.
She's a very good friend of mine at an adult age. Yes, we're mother-daughter, but we're very good friends.
That's Nancy Corbin, Linda's mother. She admits that she wasn't entirely thrilled when Mark and Linda started dating.
Mark is not a choice I would have made for Linda. From the beginning, Mark showed an arrogance, had where he wanted to isolate Linda, all bad signs, and so it was noticed by me right away.
Nancy let her daughter make her own choices and was even supportive when Mark and Linda decided to go into business together. Linda said she'd been interested in opening a dog boarding business. In 1992, Linda and Mark opened Island Dog Adventures. Linda ran the boarding part of the company, and Mark handled the dog training.
You essentially were the CEO, right?
Yes, it was all of what we developed there was my business idea, my development, my money. I did capitalize it to go in.
Linda thought Mark's reputation in the industry helped, and her parents leased Linda the perfect place to set up shop.
Beautiful piece of property that my family has owned, no longer owns, but did purchase in the 80s.
Kickett Island and the surrounding area once belonged to the Swinomish tribe. Besides a clearing for some buildings, the island is a thick forest with tall Douglas firs and western red cedars.
I don't think there's probably many places like that, whether dogs live on there or people live on there. It's just a terrific place.
Their house was at the end of a long, narrow driveway that felt like you were almost entering Jurassic Park. The sprawling property filled with wildflowers, hills, and beaches made it seem otherworldly. Business started booming. Over time, Island Dog Adventures turned into $1 million operation. Linda said that despite their success, Mark started to become obsessed with money, tightly controlling her spending.
For example, an avocado that was too much money really upset him. I remember another time
Excuse me, you guys have $1 million business. He's upset that you bought an avocado?
Yes. Yes.
And you're serious?
I'm absolutely serious, yes. He would be in a rage that I spent too much money and it was an inappropriate expenditure on things.
Most of their attention was going to the business and not each other.
And we were working, 7 days a week, 15-hour days, and there was really not any time for personal relationships.
Despite her concerns, Linda was committed to making things work.
I just kept thinking that if I could reduce our workload, if we could make some changes and try to get more personal time, that the relationship could be salvageable and work. So we went through some counseling, and at that point in time, Mark did want to get married, and I, again, because of the commitment, said, okay.
On May 17, 2002, Mark and Linda were married in a small wedding at the Four Seasons Hotel in Las Vegas. She was 38. He was 50.
This is a picture from the wedding in Las Vegas, and this is Linda Opdyke. This is her mother, Nancy Corbin.
Victoria, Mark's sister, showed me photos from the wedding.
At this picture, he thinks he's at the beginning of a very happy phase in his life, and he's the beginning of a nightmare. But he doesn't know that yet.
Mark has on a dark suit, and Linda is wearing a black dress, holding a white bouquet of flowers.
They look like a happy couple here.
They do. They do.
And your brother thought this is the one. After all those years, he married her, and that this was going to be his partner for life.
He adored this woman.
But Mark seemed different to Linda after the wedding.
Things were fine for about 4 months after the marriage, and then it really started going south.
What happened? What went wrong?
I think my desires for truly a personal, loving marriage and relationship was something that he did not want to provide and could not provide.
Linda wanted to move off the island, but she said Mark dug in his heels. He wanted to stay.
Picket Island meant a lot to Mark because it had quite a prestige to it.
Linda said she watched Mark's whole demeanor intensify.
I saw him becoming more aggressive with people, for example, on the property that were trespassing, pulling guns on people and threatening them, being verbally aggressive and very threatening.
According to Linda, Mark developed a reputation for threatening locals. He would even use his dogs to intimidate people.
My experience with him was he was very unstable, and with that and his agitated state, and he had real highs and lows and rages that he dealt with, it was very concerning to me and what his reaction would be to something, how that would affect my safety.
After nearly 14 years together, including 3 years of marriage, Linda decided that she couldn't do this anymore.
I recognized that I was so unhappy, and I knew that I needed to leave the marriage, and I got a separation.
She moved out of their home. Linda left the island that was owned by her family to start anew, set off on a new path alone. But she said Mark followed.
He told me that he was listening to phone conversations and that he had been in my house and read my diaries, and just it was horrifying. It was chilling to me. Every single moment you're wondering when you walk out the door, is he going to be there? I know how he operated and his stalking abilities and hunting abilities.
The fallout from their collapsed marriage started a nasty back and forth that would culminate in that bloody scene at Mark's house.
This is war. This is goddamn war. You've wrecked my life enough.
I really did feel that my life was in danger.
Coming up on Trained to Kill, the dog trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard.
I remember at that time thinking, this can't be real, because no woman alone could go through this amount of harassment.
My first thought was, oh, a body.
I have a safe room in there. I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C.
I think Mark had a very real fear of what Linda was capable of doing to him.
He told me that he was capable of killing without remorse.
This is not a case of self-defense. This is a case of cold-blooded murder.
From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill, the dog trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard. The following episode contains references to harassment, intimidation, and stalking. Listen with care.
I left, actually it was a birthday gift to myself in September 2005.
That gift to herself for her 41st birthday was something Linda Opdyke had long desired, a separation from her husband, Mark Stover.
I moved out of the main house of my family's property up to a small guest house on the property.
But while Linda put some space between herself and Mark, she didn't leave Kickett Island, home to their profitable dog training business, Island Dog Adventures.
I stayed there for a number of months to see if Mark would finally understand the seriousness that I really would be leaving if we could not build a relationship and he would seek help.
At that point, they'd been together for 14 years, the last 3 as a married couple. After nearly 7 months, Linda finally decided she was ready.
I drove down from the house that I was staying at down to the main house, and I told him that I wanted a divorce. And he, right there and then, I could tell he just snapped. He went just sheer white. His eyes went just crazy. He clenched his hands and fists, and he was just in a shaking rage with me.
Startled, Linda said she stayed as calm as she could and tried to lower the temperature by offering to talk, but could tell she needed to leave. She got into her Suburban and drove back to the guest house.
I knew I just had a short period of time to grab a bag and leave.
As she gathered her things, Linda could see Mark heading in her direction.
And he comes out of the car and he's, shaking his fists. He says, "You've got war. I'm not going to grant this to you. You've got a big fight on your hands."
In April 2006, Linda said she fled Kickett Island, a property her family owned. She was now on the run.
Well, instantly at that point when I left, he was calling me constantly. It was obsessive phone calls on my cell phone, trying to reach me. He would call, 40, 50 times that evening.
She kept her whereabouts a secret.
I left the area and was just traveling around with my dog in a suitcase in hotels, just trying to move through the state. He'd leave messages on my cell phone that he was driving all over the state to try to find me.
This is war. This is goddamn war. You've wrecked my life enough.
Linda spent the summer and fall of 2006 in Sisters, Oregon. That December, she relocated to the western-themed town of Winthrop, Washington. The downtown included an antique boardwalk and old-time saloons. Linda got a house outside of town. She put more than 250 miles of winding roads and a mountain range between her and Mark.
I left the whole west side of the state.
She tried everything to avoid leaving a trail.
I immediately stopped my credit card accounts. I was worried that he would follow me there. I got a mailing address in Bellevue. I tried to close contact with anything where I could be tracked.
But Mark, an avid hunter, still managed to track Linda down. On October 16, 2007, at about 7 a.m., Linda said she was getting ready to start her day.
I just stepped out of my shower right here, and I heard my dog, Soju, in the backyard barking incredibly loud, very defensive, like I've never heard her bark before.
Linda scanned the hillside overlooking her house.
And I see Mark Stover hunkered down with a hunting rifle pointed right at me through the window, looking through his spotting scope.
According to Linda, the man she left was crouched down like a lion, preparing to pounce on his prey.
I really did feel that my life was in danger.
That incident would be one of many in which Linda said her life was threatened. I'm Peter Van Sant. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill: The Dog Trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard. Episode 2, The Hunter.
I walked away from almost literally everything except for my own investments that I had before I met him.
In the spring of 2006, Linda Opdyke was perfectly fine leaving everything behind, if that meant getting away from her husband, Mark Stover. We spoke about this in 2010.
How much money was the business making? How successful was it?
It became very successful. At the time I left in September 2005, it was just under $1 million a year that it was making.
That's extraordinary.
It really is.
Linda said she took none of that money with her when she left.
Well, I put in over $100,000 as startup capital into the business. I can't recall what the divorce settlement was, but it was not much over $100,000. I did not get any retirement benefits out of it. I got no proceeds from the business.
But she said Mark still wanted more. She said his rage and incessant calls pushed her to give him what he wanted. According to Linda, Mark demanded she return one of her dogs to the island.
He told me that he would track me down to no end until he could have the dog back. So I thought that if I gave the dog back, that he would leave me alone.
But Linda said that wasn't enough either. Karen Lundgren worked at a salon near Linda's house in Winthrop. She told me about a frightening moment when Mark dramatically entered the salon.
Linda Opdyke was here, and I was sitting here.
What were you doing?
I was doing a European facial on her. And of course, she's lying down like this. And Mr. Stover came in and moved the screen and walked right in. And stood here.
Just barges right in.
Just stood right here.
She sat Linda up.
She said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I saw your vehicle, so I thought I'd just stop in and see you." And
just saw your vehicle. He lives more than 150 miles away from here.
Right.
Karen was sure Mark hadn't just stumbled upon Linda's car. He'd somehow crossed a mountain range and tracked her down. The two spoke, and Karen said Mark left after a few minutes. But Linda said Mark's stalking behavior didn't stop at the beauty salon.
He came into my bedroom, somehow gotten into my house, came into my bedroom.
Linda said he had an uncanny ability to get inside her home.
I was in bed about 9 o'clock at night, and he walks in and he's got a gun in his hand. He'd told me he had just driven 18 hours straight from Montana. Then he gets on his knees bedside, puts a gun right on my pillow right next to my head, and then starts sobbing and is very emotional about not wanting to let the divorce go.
She tried to stay calm and sat with him until he decided to leave. Linda said instead of calling the police, she tried to handle those kinds of unwanted visits herself.
You're just dealing with what you see at the time and trying not to escalate his behavior and get him upset off the chart to hurt me. Another big reason why I did not make a report initially on a number of things is I knew he would deny being here.
But she didn't think her tactics were working. She found herself feeling increasingly paranoid.
So you'd hear any noise and you're wondering, is it Mark? The phone would ring, you're wondering, is it Mark?
Yes. You wondered any time you went outside with Mark there. Then you're pulling the blinds. You're living behind closed blinds all the time. And you're trying to just move on with your life. And it's very, very difficult. It was very difficult.
On November 2nd, 2007, Linda couldn't hide her fear anymore. She called 911 after Mark came to her house and chased her in his Chevy Suburban as she tried to drive away.
And he came driving, flying down my driveway and down the road, following me at a rapid speed into Winthrop.
Linda said the police contacted Mark but didn't make an arrest. How was Mark, after all these incidents, still walking free? Soon after, Mark discovered something about Linda that truly pushed him over the edge. It involved Mark's friend and hunting partner. It had been more than 2 years since Linda's decision to leave Mark. Linda told me that Mark had forced her down a terrifying path, dodging and hiding from his harassment. But there was someone in his corner who didn't believe Linda's accusations. Someone who's known Mark longer than Linda. His sister, Victoria Simmons.
My brother adored Linda Opdyke. Just loved her.
It was hard for my brother to lose someone he loved. That was difficult for him. And he would take a while to find his bearings and move on.
She said that Mark was devastated by the separation.
He was blindsided. He told me he thought everything was fine.
Victoria doesn't believe her brother was as much of a danger as Linda Opdyke claimed.
He was terribly hurt. It was, not only was it a surprise, but the circumstances surrounding it were so painful. Double betrayal.
Mark discovered that Linda once got some drinks and went to the house of John Bonica, Mark's best man at their wedding.
It shook his foundation. He was just so angry that 2 really valuable relationships in his life were destroyed in one fell swoop. If she wanted to hurt him and really knock his feet out from under him, having an affair with John Bonica would be about the worst thing she could choose to do.
Here's Linda again.
John Bonica is a person that has known Mark for many years, and I met him shortly after meeting Mark, probably in 1992, and he was a friend to both of us. Once John learned of Mark's antics and behavior towards me, he ceased having friendship with Mark.
You developed a relationship with John Bonica, is that right?
Yes.
A romantic relationship?
Very briefly, we had an intimate occurrence.
Linda said she got a call from Mark the day after she and John were together. He told her that he knew what they'd done.
Described in detail of what had occurred between John and myself that evening.
And was it accurate?
Yes, it was accurate. It was horrifying.
So, do you believe that someone was at John Bonica's house watching you be intimate with John?
Yes, I do. And after hearing that from Mark, I actually drove down with a friend down there to see if I could find any signs of Mark being there. And I went down there and saw tire tracks of where the Suburban was parked. I saw footprints of his LL Bean boots. They have a very distinct tread. I could see them along the fence line and up to the house. And John told me that he saw the same thing and received phone calls from Mark saying that he was in his house as well at other times.
She said that John was horrified and fearful of Mark.
He wrote me a letter saying that he needed to cease any friendship or relationship with me due for the safety of him, his children, and he advised me to do the same thing, to take all precautions that I could for my safety and well-being as he was.
When Mark found out about John, he was so angry that Linda decided to go stay with her father in Hawaii until things cooled down. She returned several weeks later, in January 2008, when Mark finally signed the divorce papers. Linda still didn't think having the divorce finalized would make Mark stop, so she reached out to the local sheriff's office to let them know she was worried.
My initial advice to her is immediately get a protection order.
Here's then Chief Deputy Dave Rodriguez with the Okanagan County Sheriff's Office. He told Linda that if she got a protective order, law enforcement could act more decisively.
To where if you do make even these loose kind of threats, we can do something about it. But without a protection order, it's harder.
Did Linda seek it out?
She didn't.
She didn't?
She did not.
Why not?
I have no idea.
Linda said she was now relying on the advice of security experts she hired.
They felt this particular type of personality, that getting a domestic violence protection order and contacting the police could possibly escalate the situation.
Some of the sheriff department staff still tried to help Linda, even though she wouldn't file for a protective order. After hours, once they got off the clock, they agreed to help Linda. Here's Sergeant Gene Davis.
We felt, at least I felt, the threat was severe enough that we did every option we could to help her out by training a protection dog, similar to a police dog, but it's more designed if somebody came to her house and tried to harm her, her dog would protect her.
What kind of dog did she have?
She had a young female German Shepherd.
And those are good guard dogs, right?
A very good dog. I have one myself.
Linda specifically wanted a dog that hadn't been trained by Mark and had no connection to him. Remember, she only met Mark because she needed him to train one of her dogs for protection. And now she was training a dog against that same man. But Linda concluded that wasn't enough. She wanted even more security.
I installed cameras onto my house, added to the security system.
Linda got into a routine of checking her cameras every day and reviewing footage. Her instincts proved to be right. While the divorce had been finalized, Linda said it seemed nothing would stop Mark from harassing her. Linda said one of her cameras spotted a ghostly black and white image of Mark in the middle of the night.
It was very creepy, very eerie, very scary, knowing he was here. And then seeing his body language, and he went underneath the house, and all of a sudden you can tell he had recognized that there was cameras here, and then he's seen 2 minutes later walking away with the shirt pulled over his head and sneaking off the property.
We reviewed the footage, and you can see a man crossing Linda's lawn, pulling up a shirt to cover his face. She said Mark started calling her, demanding she give back their wedding photos. Here's a voicemail of Mark threatening Linda. It's a little hard to hear, but Mark is saying, I swear to God, if I ever find out that you're in possession of those wedding pictures, you know I'm a guy who can hold a grudge. At one point, Linda was convinced that Mark tapped her phones and was listening to her calls.
I knew for a fact that he was on my phones because I was talking to my stepmother, and she was telling me about how the Montana police were utilizing tasers, and she was asking me if I knew anything about tasers for one of my self-defense tools. And Mark called and left a message and said, "You gals sitting around talking about tasering me and shooting me," and he says, "I would have let you shoot me at one point in time, but now I'm going to survive this just to ruin your life."
Fearing that Mark's campaign of harassment was now escalating toward violence, Linda started brainstorming both battle and escape plans.
Getting all those firearms, was that wise or was that paranoia?
I think it was very wise. I'm dealing with somebody that was incredibly skilled with firearms. He was somebody that would go on hunting trips, and he would stay on his hunting trips until he acquired his hunt, his kill. And I knew this was somebody that could take my life. It was a real threat.
To her, Mark had proven he was willing to cross any boundary she set. Linda decided to turn her house into a fortress.
I have a safe room in there. I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C if he comes in this door, if he comes into my bedroom, if he breaks in downstairs.
She gave me a tour of her hidden arsenal.
This one was put in the living room entryway area. Obviously, I'm very vulnerable in this area.
We walked from room to room as she pointed out the spots where she was hiding her guns.
There's this magnet right here.
Yes.
So there was a gun hooked onto that.
Yes.
She had one in her office, one next to her bed, and one in the hallway, another behind a wall hanging. It seems she was never more than 6 feet away from a firearm.
The security company installed a magnet for me to have bedside.
As she guided me through her security system, I couldn't help but think how this reminded me of something out of a James Bond movie. I had never seen so many guns in a home in my life.
I knew exactly what they were, so in a time of stress that I could count on them being there. It wasn't like, wow, where's my firearm? Do I have it on me to defend myself? They were always consistently there.
Linda felt certain that Mark would eventually try to hurt, maybe even kill her. But until she had hard evidence, a witness, or filed for a protection order, sheriff's deputies couldn't arrest him. Then, on March 18, 2008, at about 10 a.m., Linda's neighbor, Ruthie Hagmeister, was on her way over to visit.
We were going to do some cooking together and then take our dogs for a walk. As I pull up here, I notice there's a white station wagon here, and there's a gentleman over at Linda's trash cans taking the trash out of the trash cans.
Right across the street.
Right across the street.
Ruthie was immediately suspicious and pulled her car right up to this man's white station wagon.
I blocked this car. I did. I blocked this car, and I proceeded to get out of my car. I left my door open, and I asked the gentleman, I said, "Excuse me, who are you?" He says, "My name is John." I go, "Why are you taking my friend's trash?" And he's like, "I have permission to take the trash." You have permission to take someone's trash. How can you have permission to take someone's trash?
You're not buying it.
No, I'm not buying it at all. So I proceed to say, okay, well, we'll find out. I walk around my truck to the passenger door. My cell phone's on the seat. Pick up my cell phone, and I dial Linda's house. I'm like, "Linda, there's a man down here, In the meantime, he's getting the trash, throwing it in his car, closing the door. I'm like, there's a man down here stealing your trash.
And I said, no, I couldn't believe it. And she said, yes. She starts describing who this person is, and it's Mark.
While Ruthie was on the phone, Mark got back in his car and drove off.
And Ruthie's like, no, this is, something's really wrong with this. And we're like, wow, so finally somebody's seen him. There's a witness to him being here. So she calls 911, and that was, he finally got pulled over for that.
After more than 2 years of what Linda described as a campaign of harassment and fear, the county finally had enough evidence to charge Mark with stalking and theft. Mark entered what's called an Alford plea. That's when someone claims to be innocent, but admits there's enough evidence that a judge or jury will likely find them guilty. Mark was sentenced to 2 years probation and 12 months of anger management. The court also entered a protection order against him, which meant Mark had to turn over all of his weapons and never go near Linda ever again. Linda was not satisfied with the sentence.
He got a slap on the hand, and it was very disheartening to me.
Throughout 2008 and into 2009, Linda repeatedly called the sheriff's office to report suspicious activity she thought could be Mark. But she was never able to link those situations to him, but stayed vigilant about her security. And in the summer of 2008, Linda made a decision that would forever change her life. She hired a former security consultant to do an assessment of her house.
I did an analysis of sort of her home security situation and what the steps she was taking, looked into the people that she was working with, and made some suggestions on that front.
His name was Michiel Oakes. He was a gun and safety enthusiast. Similar to her relationship with Mark, things started professionally, but soon became something more.
Did you fall in love with her?
I did.
That same summer, Mark left Kickett Island for Anacortes, Washington, about 10 miles away. He bought several acres and a new house on Thompson Road, where he opened his new business. His sister Victoria said Mark even started dating someone new, Teresa Vox Michael.
He was amazing. He would drive down almost every weekend, take me to dinner.
To those around him, Mark really seemed to have moved on.
He was joking with me all the time, and he was always fun, when we were on the phone, and yeah, he was very happy.
Then, in October 2009, Linda heard from one of Mark's employees.
And she informed me via email late in the afternoon that Mark was missing. I was very concerned that he would be coming over my way.
But detectives had a different theory. They believed Mark was dead. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill. Trigger warning, the following episode contains references to harassment, stalking, and physical violence. Listen with care.
Dispatch, can I help you?
In August 2009, an anonymous man called the Skagit County Sheriff's Office 911 hotline.
There's a crime that's going to take place in the morning.
It involved a dangerous drug dealer.
There's going to be a van transporting some drugs from the Anacortes area to I-5 and then to Seattle.
The dispatcher then asked the caller for the person's name.
And do you know the name?
His last name is Stover, S-T-O-V-E-R.
Stover, as in Mark Stover, the dog trainer to the stars who had moved to Anacortes, Washington.
Okay, and is somebody there with you, or why are you whispering?
Yeah, it's something that's very delicate. I have to not be found out about this. He's very dangerous, perpetually carries a gun.
It's a little tough to hear, but he's warning them that Mark carries a gun. He said, "This is very dangerous."
I wish you guys would do something before it kills somebody.
He says, "I wish you guys would do something before he kills somebody."
Alrighty, well, I've got the call in, and we'll pass it along to the deputies for you.
Thank you.
The following day, Mark Stover was pulled over by sheriff's deputies.
He was asked if they could search his car. He refused.
This is Lee Heron. She's a private investigator Mark hired after the incident. Lee said when Mark refused to cooperate, the officers wouldn't let him leave.
A search warrant was obtained, a canine was brought to the scene, and there was a positive hit.
The dog detected some drugs.
The police found a small metallic box on the undercarriage of Mark's vehicle, which contained a couple of marijuana cigarettes and some very low-grade cocaine.
Mark told the deputies the box had been planted. They let him go, but from then on, Mark watched his back.
It was such a deliberate act. It said, "We're setting you up. We want you to go to jail." I think Mark had a very real fear of what Linda was capable of doing to him.
I'm Peter Van Sant. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill: The Dog Trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard. Episode 3, Secret Meetings. At the time Mark Stover was pulled over by police, Linda Opdyke said she had moved on from her ex-husband.
I just wanted to go on with my life with Michael, and I wanted Mark to go on with his life.
Michael was Michiel Oakes, a security expert. We spoke back in 2010.
I remember at that time thinking, this can't be real, because no woman alone could go through this amount of harassment.
Michael said they met at a Starbucks and quickly connected over their love of books. By the fall of 2008, Michael said their business relationship turned romantic.
I said to her, I think we have a connection that could go beyond friendship, and is that something that you're open to? And I think she, as you may know, she's almost 6 feet tall, and I'm 5'6". She's never had children. I have 4 children. So it was an unlikely romance. But she said, I have gone through a lot of things in my life, and I'm open to considering that.
Linda was impressed by how dedicated Michael was to his family. After getting a divorce from his first wife, Michael took full custody of their kids. He even treated the kids of his second wife as his own.
Everything he did took into account of his children. He worked at home so he could be there for them. He was a full-time single parent. He drove them to school every morning. He made sure he had Friday night movies time with them or game evenings. The family was a priority to him.
Michael described himself as a self-taught security specialist skilled in firearms.
I ended up training with a lot of the alphabet soup of government agencies and SWAT teams and so on. And it's what we call force-on-force training. I owned a small company in Seattle here, and I managed to get some training equipment and figure out how to use it.
People have said that you are a gun enthusiast. Is that true?
Yes, I am a gun enthusiast. I've taught all my kids from the earliest age that I felt they were safe, gun safety. And I have shot competitively for some years.
You've been described as Linda Opdyke's bodyguard, as well as boyfriend.
Right.
Is that accurate?
I don't believe it's accurate. Let's put it that way. She never paid me to be a bodyguard. I did a little bit of research, and I did an analysis of sort of her home security situation and what the steps she was taking. Looked into the people that she was working with and made some suggestions on that front. And that was the extent of what I would consider my professional interaction with her.
And did she pay you for that consulting?
You know, she wrote me a check, but it was just for my expenses. And it was a minimal amount of money. I don't even remember now what it was, but less than $1,000. So, I mean, it was minimal.
Michael said that by the spring of 2009, he and his kids started spending a lot of time at Linda's house in Winthrop, which was more than 200 miles north from Michael's place in Kennewick, Washington.
It's a beautiful love. It's, in my opinion, it's legendary. It's something that you read about in romance novels or movies.
Their relationship deepened. What seemed to make it even better was that Linda said she hadn't heard from Mark since he had been arrested for stalking and theft.
I was believing and hoping that that had enough impact, and he recognized that this behavior was unacceptable and that he would be moving on with his life. And we went for many months where nothing happened.
To her, the nightmare finally felt over.
I really started feeling more at peace in my life and more at ease, and really felt that he was moving on and I was able to move on into a new relationship with nothing from the past hampering that.
But according to Michael, the past roared back into the present when Mark Stover unexpectedly re-entered their lives.
Mark Stover sought me out one day, out of the blue, and told me that I would do what he wanted. And from that point, for almost 6 months, I lived in constant fear.
Michael said that Mark hadn't stopped stalking, he just found a new target.
The Mark Stover you got to know, was he a frightening man?
Very.
Intimidating?
Very much so.
Threatening?
Constantly with me.
Michiel Oakes said the first time he encountered Mark Stover was a real shock. It was around Memorial Day 2009. Michael and Linda had been in a romantic relationship for about 9 months.
I think it was a weekday morning. I had just dropped my kids off at school.
Michael said he then made a stop at Costco.
And went in the store. When I came out, he was standing by my car. And because I had done research for Linda Opdyke some months previously, I'd seen a picture of him. I immediately recognized him.
Mark Stover is standing next to your car.
Next to my car in the parking lot.
In Kennewick, Washington, which is on the other side of the mountains from where we are now.
Yes.
The drive from Mark's home in Anacortes to this Costco in Kennewick, Washington would have taken about 5 hours. Yet there he was, according to Michael, menacingly standing by Michael's car.
He's very icy, actually. He said that he had been listening to our calls and he knew all about me. And he knew that I was in a relationship with Linda. He said his wife. He didn't say his ex-wife. He said his wife. And he said that there was something of his that she wouldn't give back and that I was going to get it for him.
Michael couldn't remember if he said anything to Mark or if he just gave him a confused look as he waited to hear Mark's demand.
He said that Miss Opdyke would not give back their wedding photo albums. And he said I was going to get them back for him. And then he went on to describe what my daughters were wearing that morning.
What they'd worn to school.
And there's no way he could have seen.
And what did you realize at that moment?
He had been following us a whole time. And he said that he told me all the details of what they're wearing, their backpack colors, everything.
Michael said that Mark told him to bring the wedding photos to the Northgate Mall in Seattle on July 14th, 2009. He said he agreed.
Why didn't you at that moment simply look him in the eye and say, Mark Stover or whoever you are, get away from me. I don't ever want to speak to you again. If you get anywhere near my children, I'll call the police.
I'm not a confrontational person at all. That's not my mode. I felt very much off balance in that meeting. And I think it's one of those things where once I'm driving away, thinking I should have said this or I should have done that, there was something about him that was chilling to me. And I kept trying to talk myself out of it. It can't be real. It can't be real. He has to be fooling.
Michael said at first he was going to call the police, but then decided against it, worried about getting Linda involved.
Did Michael tell you that Mark Stover approached him and demanded wedding photos?
No.
Why wouldn't he share this vitally important information with you?
My guess in knowing Michael is he really did not want to stress me out more.
Michael said that when July 14th rolled around, he went to meet Mark at the Nordstrom store at the Northgate Mall, just as he said Mark demanded. Michael said that since he didn't tell Linda about this meeting, he arrived empty-handed, no wedding photos. Michael said Mark got angry and scolded him.
What was his obsession with these wedding photos?
Well, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. It enraged him, I believe, in retrospect, that she chose not to continue the marriage with Mark Stover, to continue to do what he wanted, and yet she retained something that he felt was part of him.
A couple of weeks later, Michael suggested to Linda that they leave and go on a trip out to Whitefish, Montana. That's where Linda's father, Wally Opdyke, had a house.
We were going to stay there and stayed at their vacation home.
En route to Whitefish, Michael remembered making a stop so Linda could take her dog for some exercise and he could pick up some snacks. But Michael said when he got in line to check out, he spotted a familiar face standing near the front door.
And I'm in line minding my own business and look across the way and I see Mr. Stover standing by the entrance to the store staring at me.
And what was that moment like for you?
Very similar to the first time that I saw him. It's just a shock of recognition in a place you don't expect to see somebody.
Michael, why didn't you just say to him, you get away from me. If you get anywhere near me and Linda again, I'm calling the cops.
There's at least two reasons. One of them is I do know enough about protection to know that there's no way for me to, this is why the president has so many people that protects him from potential threats. One man cannot protect three children 24/7. And for any time that I could enrage or outrage Stover, it was putting a gun to the head of my children, in my opinion.
You felt if you confronted Mark Stover, you'd be putting yourself in more danger instead of dealing with the threat that he posed to you?
Absolutely, and I'm certainly not the first person to feel that way.
By now, Michael said Mark's uncanny ability to find him and Linda wherever they went made him realize Mark posed a real danger to his family.
Mark Stover was remarkably sophisticated in some ways. He had managed to penetrate Linda's computer prior to meeting me. He managed to tap a phone. Finding us in Montana was impossible, and I took tremendous steps not to be followed, and yet there he was. How did he find us?
By late September of 2009, Michael said that Mark demanded that they set up another meeting after he and Linda were back from Montana.
He was getting progressively less patient with me.
This time at a church in Anacortes. By now, Michael decided to wear his Kevlar vest to the meetings. He said that he drove west across the state to the church parking lot, not far from Mark's house, and waited. Still unable to find the wedding photos, Michael said he brought 2 pictures of Linda with her horse, so Mark would have something to look at. But Michael said he didn't show up, and Michael felt helpless.
And the thought of just at any given one of these meetings that we had, just telling him, I'm done, take a hike, and don't come looking for me, And every time, the reality of knowing that there's no way I can keep my kids myself and Ms. Opdyke safe if he decides he's going to go for it. Pulled me back from that brink.
But were all these stories Michael was telling me true? Some people who knew Michael well said he had a darker side to his personality, a potentially violent side.
During the course of our marriage, he told me that he was capable of killing without remorse. Michael Oakes had a dual personality. He was a family man by day and tried to live up this action hero persona in the background.
That's Jennifer Thompson. She knows Michael Oakes as well as anyone. Jennifer was his second wife. I talked to her in 2010.
You know, we eloped. It wasn't a wedding.
She said they were married when Michael first met Linda. Jennifer said that she loved him, but that Michael had an insecure side.
Is he a tough guy?
Well, no.
An action hero kind of guy?
No, he thinks he is.
How do you mean?
He wanted to be. He wanted to be. He idealized that. He read about it. He aspired to be that.
According to Jennifer, Michael thought part of being tough meant being armed.
Michael Oakes was very infatuated with guns, weapons, and I think they made him feel powerful, strong, capable.
There was one book Jennifer said Michael referenced a lot.
It's called On Killing, and it's a book about the psychology of killing.
The book examines how people learn to kill in war. Jennifer said that Michael zeroed in on a part that described how one small sliver of the population could be vicious.
Michael Oakes told me that he was in the small percentage of people who could kill without remorse.
She said that over time, Michael's fascination with killing and his tough guy persona rotted out their marriage.
Michael had a really strong sense of righteousness, and he believed that bad people should be taken out so that the good people can not be harmed. The problem is he decided who was bad and who wasn't, and he felt that he had the right to just take a bad man out. And we would argue about that. We argued about that for years. Right and wrong, can you kill, can you not kill? And it was a point of contention in our marriage.
Jennifer told me that the final straw came when verbal tensions between them turned physically abusive.
I remember his hand coming up and slapping me across the face, and I remember it very clearly. And I was expecting, after feeling it, I was expecting the, oh my God, I'm sorry, oh my God. And he didn't. He said, get the out of my house. And he chased me down the stairs. And I could feel his breath on my neck and his body behind me. It was horrible. It was horrible because I trusted him. I trusted him, and he had been angry before. He had shown aggression before, never at me.
Michael told us no one should believe Jennifer's allegations against him. In July of 2008, a year after they tied the knot, Jennifer left with her 2 biological kids.
And I went to my mom's, and I spent 2 weeks, just took my kids to Disneyland, went to the beach, just got away from it. And then decided that I needed to get an apartment somewhere because I couldn't go back to the house. On August 15th, he said, if you can't give me a date that you're coming back, we're done. And so he told me he wanted a divorce.
Soon after, Michael Oakes and Linda Opdyke set up their first in-person meeting.
I think he's a very insecure man, and I think that he musters up confidence really well. He's an excellent salesman. He's an excellent presenter of images.
As the fall of 2008 began, Jennifer faded from his life, as Michael, the action hero wannabe, now had a new woman in his sights. And as Michael's relationship with Linda grew deeper, he said Linda's ex-husband, Mark, became obsessed. constantly calling him on the phone, asking for meetings. By October 2009,
it's become very, very clear to me that in my mistaken belief that I could appease or satisfy Mark Stover, I did become yet another person who was doing exactly what Mark Stover wanted.
he had reached a fateful breaking point.
I kept thinking, if I can just, this is the one thing he wants that Linda Opdyke won't give him, and if she just gives him what he wants, he'll leave us alone.
Michael said the two men finally agreed to meet again on October 24, 2009, at that same church in Anacortes. There is surveillance video from Linda's house showing Michael packing up his car to head out that day.
It appeared that he was taking off for a fairly serious journey.
That's Lee Heron again, Mark's former private investigator. She examined the video herself.
He was loading a number of items into his car, including a rifle bag.
As Michael is packing, you can see Linda come out onto their deck. They touch hands, and then Linda wraps her arms around Michael. They share a long, heartfelt embrace, the kind that suggested to me that something important lay ahead, something serious. Here's Lee again.
The long, passionate embrace that was captured on Linda's surveillance cameras indicates that Michiel Oakes thought of himself as the prince who was out to slay the dragon, his perceived dragon, for the damsel in distress. And his perceived dragon was Mark Stover.
Michael and Linda kissed, and he drove away. Hours later, Michael claimed he came face to face with Mark Stover in that church parking lot.
He was extremely agitated, not cold and calculating, not controlled like that first meeting. He was erratic.
Michael said Stover once again demanded those wedding pictures.
So did you give him those photo albums that he wanted?
I never found them.
Late that night, Michael is seen returning to Linda's home. But is it possible this entire story was all a ruse for a failed murder attempt? Because 4 days later, at 2:30 a.m. on October 28th, Michael is again seen on surveillance video driving away from Linda's house. This time, Michael said the two men would meet in private at Mark Stover's house in Anacortes. Michael claimed that Mark had told him this was his last chance to turn over those damn wedding pictures.
It was put up or shut up time.
But what really happened when they met remains a mystery. Only those who saw the bloody aftermath can express what they felt.
I can only describe it as evil. Something horrible, something terrible.
From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill, the dog trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard.
Gadget 911, what's your emergency?
It's not an emergency, but I need a sheriff to come out here to Summit Park Grange.
This is Tammy Gilden in Anacortes, Washington. She called 911 sometime before 11:50, the morning of October 28, 2009, when she and her mother noticed a man trespassing behind the Grange Hall. It's an event facility about half a mile from Mark Stover's house.
I just saw one guy.
Okay. Did you say anything to him?
Nope, I just backed up and pulled in front.
Tammy noticed that the guy was at the back of the property, where no one should be parked.
There's two vehicles, they're facing back to back.
One of those two vehicles was a white station wagon. The other was a black SUV.
They were transferring something back and forth or living back and forth or something.
What Tammy saw was both odd and disturbing. Whatever the object being transferred was, Tammy remembered it was large and covered in plastic.
My first thought was, oh, a body. I thought, oh, you're reading a murder mystery. Silly girl. You know, that's not a body.
As they sat in their car at the front of the property, Tammy and her mom waited for a deputy to arrive. Tammy said the stranger got into the black SUV, leaving the station wagon behind.
I didn't see his face head on when we first pulled in. I saw him when he pulled next to us to leave.
He drove right up next to their car before stepping on the gas and speeding away.
We were scrambling to find pen and paper and write the license plate number down.
Tammy called the sheriff again.
Dispatch, can I help you? Yeah, hi. I called about needing the sheriff at some.
They gave the dispatcher the license plate number and a description of the trespasser's car.
It's the black SUV. Which direction did it leave? He turned on Stevenson. He turned west on Stevenson.
He was driving toward downtown Anacortes. Minutes later, Skagit County Sheriff's Deputy Rick Duhame arrived and checked out the station wagon, and then went looking for the black SUV. It didn't take long.
I noticed the license number matched the piece of paper that the reporting party had given me. I turned around in the vehicle, made a traffic stop.
The deputy went up to the car window.
It was raining. He had sunglasses on, which is unusual. He was extremely nervous.
Deputy Duhame asked the man, who was hiding his eyes, for an ID.
He didn't listen to the question and then repeated my question to me, so he wasn't tracking the conversation we were having.
The deputy explained that he pulled the driver over for trespassing.
His story was he was headed to the casino, which is down the road.
During the conversation, the deputy noticed that the driver had some dog hair on his clothing, and he noticed a big bundle of blankets in the back of the SUV. He didn't think much of it. This just so happened to be the same morning that Mark Stover's employees reported seeing their boss tear out of his driveway in his white Chevy station wagon. And this traffic stop was just a few hours later. No one yet knew Mark was missing. The deputy took the driver's ID.
And went back to my patrol car, ran a driver's check on him, made sure that the car was registered to him. I pulled over Michiel Oakes.
And the bundle of blankets in the back? Only later would he learn that was Mark's dead body.
The whole case took off.
I'm Peter Van Sant. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill, The Dog Trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard. Episode 4, The Bundle in the Back. After the sheriff's deputy let Michiel Oakes drive away, with just a warning, Michiel made a phone call, but not to his girlfriend, Linda Opdyke.
It was unexpected. It was out of the blue. It wasn't pre-coordinated.
It was to his ex-wife, Jennifer Thompson. She lived in Everett, Washington, about an hour south of Anacortes. We spoke in 2010.
And he said, "Hey, I am available this afternoon. I'm in your area. Are you available?" I said, "Actually, yeah, I am." And he said, "Well, do you want to meet up?" I said, "Sure."
Although they had been separated for about a year, Michiel and Jennifer started talking again. She had emailed him just a few weeks earlier.
I had entered a relationship with someone, and it made me really reflect on my situation with Michiel, because I can't say I didn't love him anymore. I was healing and moving forward, but it's not just done. And so I emailed him and said, "I've met someone. I'm entering this relationship. Are you sure? Are you still sure?"
Before she started something new, Jennifer wanted to know if her marriage to Michiel was really over.
We had a pretty amazing relationship. Yeah, it had a lot of brokenness in it, but I don't know. Are you absolutely 100%? Had he said, "Yep, I'm sure," I would have said, "Okay, carry on," and moved forward. But he didn't say that. And he wrote back, "No, I'm not."
This is October 2009.
Right.
When Linda Opdyke and Michiel Oakes have become a couple, and what we've been told is they're deeply in love, he's telling you something else. He's telling you that in his mind it may not be over.
Yeah, and
your relationship with him.
And he told me that he didn't love her. I can't say what's true and what isn't. I don't know. But what he told me was that it wasn't like us. It was a convenience. They were partners. Like they each had things that the other needed.
So when Michiel called her that October morning, Jennifer agreed to meet him at a Starbucks.
And he looked very disheveled and frumpy, like just kind of hair was poofy and clothes untucked, which is different because he's usually very meticulous and neat, tidy, tucked in belt, that kind of thing.
They sat together at a table in the corner of the coffee shop.
And we kind of have some general chit chat, and then he says, "Hey, there's a beach around here?" And I said, "Well, it's Everett. It's a port. It's not very pretty, though. What are you looking for?"
She suggested a beach they could go to.
I said, "Sure, that sounds good." He says, "I have some time." He said, "But my car is really full. There's no room for you, so I'll just follow you." That's fine.
Jennifer noticed that Michiel parked far away from her and that his vehicle was caked in mud.
Well, on the way there was very strange because he was driving so carefully, laying low, trying not to draw attention to himself. And this is a man that flips a U-turn when it's convenient for him, even if it's illegal.
She said when they arrived at the beach, she watched him fumble with things in his car. Michiel suggested the two of them go for a walk.
Did he seem nervous?
No, at this time he seemed very calm, but the tension was so thick, the unspoken was so loud, and I felt, I don't know, it was really, really a strange, because he and I have very easy breezy conversations, so it was very weird, it was very uncomfortable.
Then, when they finished their walk, she said they each decided to stop at the bathroom before they left.
And so I went in, he went in, and I came out, and he was still in there. He was in there for a long time. And I sat on a picnic bench and just waited. And he came out, and he was just distraught. Something happened while he was in there. He came out, and his entire demeanor completely changed.
And so he looks upset?
He looks stressed out, like he's freaking out. He was just noticeably agitated and not okay.
What does he say to you?
Well, I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No, I think I'm in trouble." And I said, "Real trouble or like perceived trouble?" And he said, "Like 10 to 15 years felony trouble."
Knowing that Michiel could be over the top, Jennifer didn't know whether to take him seriously.
I also know this man to be very melodramatic, so I'm trying to assess him. I'm reading him and looking at him, and I'm thinking in my head, is this real? Is this not? At that point, he was sitting in my passenger seat, and I was in the driver's seat. And he was very noticeably agitated, rubbing his temples and his hair, his fingers through his hair, and really vigilant, watching around, real paranoid, freaking out.
Looking out the windows.
Yeah, at one point a patrolman had come by and he really, really went crazy. And he said, "I feel like they know, and I said, "They don't know anything. You're just a guy sitting in a car in a parking lot." He says, "You're right, it's just that guilty conscience thing." And
did you not say right then? They know what?
No, I didn't. I probably didn't want to know. Because if it was real, I didn't want to know. And if it was being dramatic, I didn't need to know.
Then Michiel said something even more unsettling.
He made reference to if he was to be pulled over, he was just trying to get out of this area. And if he had been pulled over and law enforcement had seen what was inside his car, he'd go away for life.
After that disturbing comment, Michiel got out of her car, into his, and drove away.
I think the part that disturbs me the most, my part of it, is when we parted ways that day, kissed him on the cheek. And that haunts me, He had a body in that car.
Michael left Jennifer. He drove back up to Anacortes, then drove more than 250 miles, crossing the Cascade Mountain Range for a second time in the same day. That night, he returned to Linda Opdyke's house. From Linda's home surveillance camera, you can see Michael arrive just after 11:30 p.m. On a different camera, you can see Linda in a bathrobe come out to welcome him home. Their reunion would prove short. On the evening of October 29th, 2009, the day after Mark Stover went missing, Sergeant Gene Davis with the Okanagan Sheriff's Office got a call. We talked in 2010.
I checked into service around 6 o'clock and received a call from Detective Myers with Skagit County Sheriff's Department, advising that they're working on a missing person case, Mark Stover.
Sergeant Davis knew the name Mark Stover well. Months before, he had suggested Linda Opdyke get a protective order against Mark. He also had offered to help train her dog to attack.
And I told Detective Myers, yeah, I know Linda very well, and I know Oakes very well.
Detective Myers then told Sergeant Davis that they had a lead concerning Mark Stover's disappearance. The lead included a familiar name.
Somehow, Michael Oakes, got involved in this. So I initially heard this information, and I placed a call to Dave, Chief Rodriguez, to let him know what was going on. He didn't answer.
Simultaneously, Linda calls me, and she's pretty agitated, somewhat frantic, actually.
This is Dave Rodriguez. Back in 2010, he was a chief deputy with the Okanagan Sheriff's Office.
She said an employee of Stover had just called her and said that the police were there, that Mark is missing, there's blood at the scene, and the dog's been shot. And she's very frantic. She's saying, we're not sure what's going on, and we've not ruled out the possibility that some type of violence happened at his house by him, not onto him, and he's snapped and he's coming over here.
So Linda's thinking she may be next.
This is what she's conveying to me anyhow. And I said, are you there by yourself? And she said, no, that Oakes was there. And I said, well, you should be fine, but if you don't, maybe you guys should leave the house and go stay with your mother or somewhere else. She goes, that's a good idea. That's what we're going to do.
Sergeant Davis and Deputy Rodriguez drove to Linda's place separately, unsure of what they were heading into.
It was 7 o'clock at night, and it was almost a typical fall, foggy, wintry, not wintry yet, but it was starting to mist, dark night.
Both investigators were familiar with Linda's house.
So we drove up to the house, and normally when we were going there to train with her dog, her camera system or possibly a sensor would say someone's coming up the driveway. She would always be out on the outside on the deck or whatever.
Instead of that usual warm welcome, the front door stayed closed. This visit to Linda's would clearly be different.
I used my spotlight, my high beams to, if they came out, they'd be blinded.
I tried calling her on the phone, and no answer. Yet her car was there, Oak's car was there, the lights were on, no answer.
The deputies pulled in and parked.
I'm like, we're gonna have to go. Maybe something has happened now. Maybe Stover did come to the house in between the time that I talked to her. So we need to go to the house. So we go and knock on the door.
Linda answered the door and invited them inside.
She seemed a little surprised that we were there because I didn't, last I talked to her, I said, I recommend you pack some bags and go stay with somebody else. So I think she found that a little surprising that we showed up. But, I mean, other than that, nothing unusual. Invited us in. Initially, we didn't see Michiel Oakes, but as we walked in the living room, he was walking up the stairs from a lower level.
The deputies told Michael to sit on the couch. This was after they searched between the cushions for any weapons.
I know Michael and Linda are into guns, and I asked if he was armed, and he said he was, and I removed a 9mm pistol from him. And at that point, we go into more of the questioning.
Was Linda armed as well?
No, she was not.
Linda was in a chair nearby. Even though Michael wasn't under arrest, he was clearly a person of interest in this case, having been in Anacortes on the day Mark Stover disappeared. Sergeant Davis said they read Michael his Miranda rights, just in case he said something that could be admissible in court.
And we point out that we're here on a task from Skagit County to find out if you were here, because your car was seen in the area of Stover's residence at this particular time. And I flat asked him, what were you doing over there? And that's when he said, oh, I was over there, I was visiting my ex-wife.
Chief Deputy Rodriguez noticed how distraught Linda became when Michael said that he made the trip to see his ex-wife Jennifer.
So actually in my mind is, oh, Oakes just got caught messing around with his ex-wife, and now current girlfriend just found out about it.
He said Linda left the room crying. Sergeant Davis went after her.
She kept on asking me, I don't know what's going on here. What's going on here? You know, she asked Gene, what's going on? I'm so confused. I don't know what's going on here. Numerous times to me.
Back in the living room, Chief Deputy Rodriguez continued to press Michael for an answer about why he went to visit his ex-wife.
Then he started to get pretty agitated, and he's looking around, and he goes, can I get up to find my medication? And we didn't have probable cause to have him under arrest. And I said, yeah, you're not under arrest, you can get up. So he's now looking around in the living room for his medication.
That's strange.
It is, and now Gene actually, Sergeant Davis, then I believe got the call from Skagit County, but in her house, like a lot of places up here, you don't get cell signal. He had to go out on the deck to actually get cell signal. So he's running around, I'm trying to keep an eye on him while he's looking for his medication, and then Linda comes out of the back room and asks me something, which diverted my attention briefly. And then when I looked back for Oakes, he had went down the stairs that he had come up when we initially got there.
Where'd he go?
He went downstairs. So I said, Linda, he's got to be at least, he's not under arrest, but he has to be within my sight.
Outside on the deck, Sergeant Davis was getting new information from Skagit County.
They advised that they had a search warrant signed and for us to take Oakes' vehicle. When I was outside, something caught my attention by Oakes' vehicle. I see Oakes open the back hatch, reach inside, and take out a plastic bag. Appears to be like a garbage bag.
When Sergeant Davis saw this happen, alarm bells started to go off in his mind. Why was Michael even outside? And what did he just remove from his car? Michael Oakes had just taken something out of his car, but the darkness and mist made it tough to see. Sergeant Gene Davis spotted Michael while outside talking on the phone.
So I sneak down to him, I light him up with my flashlight, and right when I hit him with the beam of my light, the plastic bag, he throws it over an embankment, and he starts going into the front of his car. I grab him, ask him what he's doing. You know, he's really agitated and nervous at this point. I'm looking for medicine, and then it goes right into it. He goes, why are you giving me the third degree? Why are you treating me like a suspect? I said, well, you're acting suspicious. And at that point, I take control of Michael Oakes and escort him back into the house.
Chief Deputy Dave Rodriguez was inside with Linda when Sergeant Davis brought Michael back.
So he walks in with Oakes. What do you say to the sergeant?
Well, the sergeant said to me what he just saw Oakes doing. And to me, that just threw the switch.
Since he knew them well, he felt that he needed to reinforce to Michael that he was no longer a friend.
You're now the suspect, and I'm the deputy. Sit down on a couch. We got the second call from Skagit County that says we have probable cause. Put him under arrest.
Sergeant Davis put on the handcuffs.
And at that point, he looked at Linda again and said, "It's going to be okay, babe."
Linda broke down.
She was crying even more now. She was basically hysterical at this point, sobbing, couldn't even make out the words that she was saying. She was completely emotional wreck at this time.
After he put Michael in the back of his car, Sergeant Davis walked out to grab whatever Michael had thrown down that embankment.
Once he's secured in the back of my car, I go and secure the garbage. It's basically a Walmart garbage sack, white garbage sack tied up.
How far away from the car was it?
It was probably 20 feet down an embankment from the car. And then I secure it and secure it in the floorboard of my front passenger of my vehicle.
He didn't open the bag. Sergeant Davis didn't want to risk spoiling the evidence, but he said that whatever was inside was heavy.
And after several minutes in my car, I started up smelling a bleach smell, a strong odor of bleach.
You smelled a strong odor of bleach coming from what was ever inside that bag?
Yes.
Skagit County deputies arrived later that night to search Michael's SUV, and Sergeant Davis gave them that unopened garbage bag.
They checked it after the warrant and discovered a firearm and what the regs and whatnot, what was in the bag.
What kind of gun?
It was a .22 pistol.
.22 caliber?
Yes.
But when they searched Michael's vehicle, there was no bundle of blankets. Investigators kept searching for Mark Stover's body.
Skagit County Sheriff's Office asked us to check any probable locations where a body may be dumped in water.
And as they gathered the evidence, Michael Oakes' story seemed more and more unbelievable.
So what are you telling me? You shot Mark Stover in self-defense?
Absolutely.
From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill.
Did you set out on the morning of October 28th, 2009 to murder Mark Stover?
I most certainly did not.
In the wee hours of October 28, 2009, Michael Oakes was seen on Linda Opdyke's surveillance footage getting in his SUV and leaving.
Why were you going to Stover's house at 2:30 in the morning?
I was driving there to be there at a prearranged time, a time set and demanded by Mark Stover himself.
And what did he say the purpose of this visit was going to be?
It was put up or shut up time. I was supposed to have obtained the wedding pictures that up till then I could not find, and I was supposed to deliver them to him or else.
And the else is what?
My children were frequently mentioned as the else, so I sent my children to stay with my parents in case it didn't go well.
As Michael told it, Mark instructed him to park about a quarter mile away from his house at the same church where they had met 4 days before.
Why didn't you just say, no, I'm not going to park there. I'm going to drive up to your home. This really sounds bizarre.
It certainly did sound bizarre, and I certainly was frightened, but we're back to that same situation. Either it's everything or it's nothing. And if it's nothing, it means that I have to scoop up my children and honestly flee to a foreign country or something, because there just was no safety inside any area that Mark Stover could find us.
Michael said he did as he was told, walked to Mark's, and was greeted at the front door by Mark along with his specially trained attack dog, Ding. From there, Michael described Mark leading him through the living room, down the hallway, and oddly, into the bathroom. That's where he claimed Mark confronted him, once again, with his never-ending obsession with those wedding photos.
And I went to his house and told him that I couldn't get the pictures. That I'd gone through her safe and they weren't in her safe, and they weren't in her house, and I presumed that she had destroyed them.
And what did Mark Stover say to that?
He didn't say much.
Instead, Michael claimed Mark suddenly turned around and walked away.
He was so agitated or erratic that he broke off in mid-conversation.
Michael said when Mark returned, he raised a gun he was holding in his left hand.
The long and the short of it was, moments later, I was shot in the chest.
But Michael had prepared for this moment. As a self-described security expert, Michael said he was wearing a bulletproof vest that allowed him to safely take the hit to the chest. He said he then quickly lunged at Mark, grabbed the gun, and returned fire.
He started a gunfight, and I won.
But the fight wasn't completely over. As Michael exited the house, he said Mark's dog Ding attacked.
The dog came at me, and I had to shoot the dog. And I stopped shooting as soon as it stopped trying to bite me.
So what are you telling me? You shot Mark Stover in self-defense?
Absolutely.
But detectives on the case soon came to a very different conclusion about what happened that morning.
This is not a case of self-defense. This is a case of cold-blooded murder.
I'm Peter Van Sant. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill, The Dog Trainer, The Heiress, and The Bodyguard. Episode 5, Put Up or Shut Up.
I want the truth from Michiel Oakes as to what really occurred on that day, October 28, 2009.
This is Detective Dan Luvera with the Skagit County Sheriff's Office. Now retired, Luvera said he spent nearly 2,500 hours investigating Mark Stover's killing.
We were a small department, and we only have 5 detectives.
Luvera thought major parts of Michael's story simply weren't true. That included the meetings over the months that Michael described having with Mark Stover.
Michiel Oakes claims he met with Mark Stover at the Northgate shopping mall in Seattle. Do you believe that meeting occurred?
No, not at all.
He claims he met with Mark Stover at a church parking lot in Anacortes. Do you believe that happened?
No, not at all.
He claims Mark Stover comes out of a Costco in Kennewick, Washington, and basically has a threatening conversation. Do you believe that happened?
No.
You think this is all made up?
I do.
I first met Detective Luvera at Mark's house back in 2010. He was a sharp detective who was meticulous and tried not to leave any stone unturned.
And we're almost a year to the day when this murder occurred.
It was dusk as we started the interview. Soon, it would be dark, just as it was when Michael said he arrived that morning. Luvera brought a big flashlight to show us the crime scene.
Michiel Oakes says he walked right up the front way steps here.
First, we went through what Michiel Oakes said happened.
He knocks on the door. Mark Stover answers the door. Mark lets him in.
Luvera and I went inside. Mark's place was like a high-end cabin with dark wood floors and exposed oak beams. He said Michael claimed that Mark brought him into that bathroom and then left before coming back with a gun.
Mark Stover comes around the corner.
Where I'm standing right now.
Where you're standing right there, right now. He says Mark Stover came around the corner, fired one shot.
Boom.
right into Michael Oakes' ballistic vest.
It's then, Michael said, he grabbed the gun from Mark's left hand and fired back at point-blank range, killing him.
The whole thing doesn't make sense.
After he told me Michael's version, Luvera then broke down for me why the evidence doesn't match Michael's story. First, he said investigators discovered that on October 28, 2009, Michael didn't drive directly to Anacortes from Linda's house. Luvera said Michael drove west for nearly 3 hours before he made a pit stop.
We have him on surveillance tape at a local Walmart store here in Mount Vernon at approximately 5:30 in the morning.
What did he buy?
Michael Oakes bought anchor line, anchor weights. He bought camo pants, camo sweatshirt, and a backpack.
Camouflage clothing.
Camouflage, yes.
Kind of an odd, eclectic bunch of stuff, isn't it?
Yes.
Luvera believed Michael bought those items not to have a talk with Mark Stover, but to hide evidence of a murder.
I believe that he bought those items to dispose of Mark's body.
Interestingly, Luvera said Michael also purchased a pair of soccer shin guards.
The reason that he bought those is that he knew Mark Stover had his dog Ding, and that Ding was trained as a protection dog.
Luvera said after his Walmart shopping, Michael headed to Anacortes.
Michael Oakes' car arrives in the area of Mark Stover's house sometime between 6:30 and 7 a.m. in the morning. It would still be dark.
Luvera then demonstrated for us what he thought actually happened at Mark's house that morning.
I think he came up the right-hand side of his driveway right here. You can see the tree lines, fence lines. He could have easy concealment. It's dark out. I think as he's in the area of the kennels right here, the dogs are barking. They sense someone or something on the property. Mark was probably alerted to the dogs barking at the kennel, sensed something was wrong.
Luvera thought a worried Mark then let Ding out of the house to confront whoever or whatever was out there in the darkness.
And I think the dog was shot right away. Ding starts to yelp. Mark hears Ding yelping. Mark comes out, probably on the carport door porch there, or maybe out in the driveway, where Michael Oakes encounters Mark Stover.
It's during that encounter that Luvera believes Michael Oakes first shot Mark Stover. Spent shell casings were found outside.
I believe Mark Stover was probably shot just right in this area where we're standing right here. It's the first time. I think he was shot several times. And the first time he was shot, he probably started to retreat back to his residence.
Luvera believed Mark only made it as far as the hallway just inside the door leading from the carport. And Michael likely fired again and finished Mark off with one final shot.
There was blood splatters on the wall here, on the wall here.
When you come into Mark's house through the carport door, immediately on your right is that bathroom. This is where, in Michael's dramatic telling, he said Mark shot him in the chest, a bullet stopped by a bulletproof vest. Michael said he wrestled the gun away from Mark and shot him dead. But Luvera is skeptical.
It's too unbelievable that he could get shot in the vest, lunge at Stover, grab his hand, twist it, and shoot Stover and take him down. He's going to back up, or he's going to grab his chest as a normal reaction of somebody being shot. But he doesn't say that. He says he immediately goes into a defensive mode and grabs Mark Stover's hand and gun, twists, shoots, fires. Mark Stover falls.
Luvera believed Michael cleaned up the bloody scene at Mark's house with bleach and put on Mark's trademark hat, just in case anyone saw him leave in Mark's station wagon. Investigators suspected the driver seen speeding down the driveway was Michael, with Mark's body in the back, and that Michael then moved Mark's body from the station wagon to his SUV later. Luvera said Michael's plan worked, fooling employee Stephanie Poore.
I saw who I thought was Mark going into the house and coming out of the house, putting stuff in the back of the hatch.
Well, what made you think it was Mark?
Because it was his hat and his jacket, and why wouldn't I think it was Mark?
Michael would continue to cover his tracks, but how long would he be able to evade authorities? After Michael left Mark's house at around 10 that morning, he was seen stopping at a store where, for some reason, he bought a pair of bolt cutters. And then a couple of hours later, just before noon, that's when Tammy Gilden made that call to report a trespasser.
Skagit 911, what's your emergency?
It's not an emergency, but I need a sheriff to come out here to Summit Park Grange.
She told me it seemed like the man was moving what looked like a body.
That was huge. They had no idea what was going on. They just happened to see two vehicles parked behind the Grange.
Then, at around 12:30, we now know that Michael was pulled over in Anacortes, Washington, by that Skagit County Sheriff's deputy.
Knowing what we know today, what was in Oakes' vehicle when he was pulled over?
Mark Stover's body.
It was in the back.
Yes.
Luvera said from there, Michael left Anacortes to go meet with his ex-wife, Jennifer Thompson. She already told us how they met at a Starbucks, went to the beach, and how, before long, she realized Michael had a body with him that day. Investigators said Michael left Jennifer at about 4 p.m., returned the bolt cutters to that store, and drove back east over the Cascade Mountains to Linda's house.
It's a rugged, two-lane highway that leads through very rural areas of Okanagan and Skagit County.
Surveillance video showed Michael arriving at Linda's at about 11:30 that night. He parked his SUV. I asked Michael about the evidence they found inside that vehicle.
Mark Stover's blood is in your vehicle. How did it get there?
Well, it got there because he was there.
Michael then left again. Where he went and what he did is unknown. He returned about 30 minutes later. It was the end of a very long day. A long day that police later learned may have been months in the making.
This is the statement of Jennifer L. Thompson. The date is now 10/30/2009. The time is now 2200 hours.
2 days after Mark's disappearance, the Skagit County Sheriff's investigators questioned Michael's second wife, Jennifer Thompson. There is some noise in the background since they are recording at her home. This is Chief Will Reichart.
I'm just going to ask you to go over some of the things that we had already talked about so that it's on the record.
The first thing they wanted on the record was concerning a call Jennifer claimed Michael received back when they were still married.
About May 2008, he told me that there was a potential job coming up that he was interested in taking, about a woman and an ex-spouse that was harassing her.
If true, that woman could only have been Linda Opdyke. Jennifer said Michael then revealed details of a sinister plan.
They would basically use Linda as sort of bait to lure the ex-spouse toward her.
Once Mark Stover was fooled into threatening Linda, Jennifer claimed the plan was to violently end that threat.
They would take him out.
Okay, and by taking him out, you understood that to be they would kill him.
Right.
And you mentioned that didn't really sit too well with you.
No,
It bothered you that he was contemplating doing something like this.
Yeah, we had, mortgage, family, house, kids kind of thing, and I said, this isn't a good thing for you to be doing, and we had a big fight about it, big argument.
Jennifer claimed that it was after this bitter argument their marriage quickly fell apart.
Eventually, I left the home in July of 2008 for separation.
1 month later, she said Michael told her that he wanted a divorce.
In January of 2009, our divorce became final, and we pretty much stopped contact.
But then, in October of 2009, Jennifer reached out to Michael. She wanted to give him one last chance to reconcile.
We still had this intensity together, and so it was just an email of, are you sure? Are you sure? Her instead of me.
Jennifer said after a few emails between them, Michael wrote that he'd soon be on the west side of the mountains and suggested they meet. This was October 24th, which is the same day Michael said he met Mark Stover at that church in Anacortes.
He just said he was here on a job, a side job, and I knew what that meant, but I didn't ask for specifics.
Did he say that job was going to be particularly dangerous, or did he?
He did. When he was leaving here, he said he was going on and that there was risk involved, possible injury to himself, that it was fairly dangerous.
Michael told me that he showed up to that October 24th meeting without the wedding photos, and that Mark demanded Michael return later in the week. The following day, Michael messaged Jennifer.
He texted me and said, job failed, I'm okay, no pay though.
3 days after that October 25th message, on the same day Mark was killed, Michael and Jennifer met again. The day that they met at that Starbucks, when Michael mentioned that he was afraid of getting arrested.
He was really concerned about getting pulled over with the things in his vehicle. He wanted to get them home and get them sterilized. And he said, if anyone sees this now, I'm going in right away.
By going in, meaning he would be arrested right away, he felt,
Right.
if somebody saw what was in his vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one final interaction with police that convinced Jennifer that Michael was the hunter in all of this. A month after Jennifer was questioned, the detectives came back to her house. They wanted Jennifer to listen to a CD. She told me her reaction after hearing the anonymous tipster's voice telling the 911 operator about a drug deal involving Mark Stover.
There's going to be a van transporting some drugs from the Anacortes area.
My first thought was, what an idiot.
Jennifer instantly recognized the voice.
I knew it was him.
How do you know it's him?
I was married to him. I know how he talks. Michael's voice was disguised, but it was his speech pattern, and it was him.
It was devastating for her. Everything she had suspected suddenly clicked.
Because in that moment, I knew it was all premeditated.
Jennifer thought back to that job Michael mentioned and remembered something else Michael told her, something he said on the day Mark Stover was shot.
Yeah, he said that the people that were helping him, and I had the impression that there were two, but I don't know that that was stated. People that were helping him were no longer helping him, and he was on his own. No one was going to help him.
So, who could be helping Michael? Well, when Jennifer was being questioned by detectives in those early days after the murder, she shared an intriguing detail.
The father of the woman was initiating the job.
That would be multi-millionaire business tycoon Wally Opdyke, Linda's father. Later, when I got to sit down with Jennifer, she explained this further.
Wally Opdyke wanted to hire Michiel Oakes to take out the ex-husband that was stalking his daughter, Linda.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
Do you believe that Linda Opdyke is involved in this? That she either paid or manipulated Michiel to kill?
I don't believe she manipulated because he's too smart for that. But I do believe that they served each other's needs.
Meaning?
I think she's as guilty as he is.
Jennifer's testimony to police suggested that Mark's murder was a premeditated, hired hit. In our interviews, Linda and Michiel both denied that her father had anything to do with Mark's death.
I believe that she knows more than what she's saying and what she's telling.
Detective Dan Livera never called Linda Opdyke a suspect, but he has always wondered if she was involved.
How would Michiel Oakes know that Mark Stover always wore a hat and wore an overcoat driving a car?
Through Linda. Linda was his basis of information. Linda had knowledge. She had direct knowledge. You know, she was married to Mark. She knew him best.
When I spoke to Michiel, he told me that he just spontaneously put on the hat after he spotted it in Mark's car that morning.
There was a pair of glasses and a cap or a hat sitting on the seat. And when I sat down, I had to move the hat. I put it on my head and thought, this shall probably do for getting down the driveway. And that's all there was to that. It didn't have anything to do with anybody but the moment.
You're telling me you just decided to put this hat on?
Well,
you hadn't been told by Linda that that's a hat that Mark Stover would wear?
No, I'd seen 2 or 3 pictures of Mark Stover.
Detective Livera told me that he wanted to ask Linda about this and many other aspects of the case.
Have you received cooperation from Linda Opdyke?
No.
As is common in a case like this, Linda and her father, Wally Opdyke, hired lawyers after Michiel was arrested.
She won't sit down and talk to you?
She won't sit down and talk to us.
She's lawyered up?
She's lawyered up.
While Linda declined to take questions from Livera, she was willing to answer mine.
Investigators believe that you must have given Michiel details of Mark Stover's life that would aid him in attacking Mark Stover, knowing when he got up, what hat he wore during the day, what car he drove with the dogs. What do you say to that?
That's simply not true. I had no interaction or contact with Mark since the protection order was issued. It's not something I wanted to have any involvement with Mark. Again, I wanted no harm or anything to happen to Mark. I just wanted to go on with my life with Michiel, and I wanted Mark to go on with his life.
In other words, did you brief Michiel Oakes on the intricacies of Mark Stover's life, right down to the hat that he liked to wear during the day, to aid him in an assassination?
Of course not.
The suggestion is out there. Did your father have anything to do with the killing of Mark Stover?
Absolutely not.
Both Linda and Michiel refused to answer most of the authorities' questions until they took the stand at trial. There was, of course, one big question Michiel still had not answered.
What did you do with Mark Stover's body?
I think that probably the nitty-gritties on that, I really want to tell you about it. We're going to have to wait to court.
From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill, The Dog Trainer, The Heiress, and The Bodyguard.
This is Peregrine Lake. Just over these trees over here is where the Opdyke residence is.
In June 2010, Chief Deputy Dave Rodriguez took me out on patrol in an Okanagan County Sheriff's fast boat on a lake just a few miles from Linda Opdyke's home outside Winthrop, Washington. Rodriguez had helped Linda Opdyke train a new attack dog, and later was one of the deputies who arrested Michiel Oakes. Months had passed since Mark Stover was murdered, and still his body had not been found.
Skagit County Sheriff's Office asked us to check any probable locations where a body may be dumped in water. Since we're so close to her home, this was on the list to check.
Michiel Oakes had spent time near these waters, and Rodriguez wanted to check if he might have sunk Mark's body here.
So how does this work?
Well, I don't know if you can see, but the lake is too big for 2 or 3 or 4 or even 6 divers to adequately search.
That's why they turned to sonar to scour the lake bed.
And we grid search across the lake, and then when we find something of interest on the sonar screen, then we put divers down on it.
And that diver will be you?
Yes, today it's me.
Then Deputy Rodriguez slowed the boat down toward a spot where he had detected some kind of an image. He put on the diver's suit.
Are you ready?
Ready.
And jumped into the water. He swam below the boat, but no luck.
It's been quite a while since Mr. Stover's been missing, so it makes it more difficult.
Decomposition.
Correct.
The search for Mark Stover had stretched across the state of Washington. The one person who could end that search decided to be coy.
Are you willing to tell authorities where you placed Mark Stover's body?
Certainly, all that I know about the whereabouts of Mark Stover, I will be more than happy to share with authorities in the course of our trial.
This is going to be a dramatic week.
It has been a dramatic year.
I'm Peter Van Sant. From 48 Hours, it's Trained to Kill, The Dog Trainer, The Heiress, and The Bodyguard. Episode 6, Time Will Tell.
Michiel Oakes has been accused of a murder of Mark Stover. What do you say?
Prove it.
That's John Henry Brown. He was Michiel Oakes' lead defense attorney. We spoke in 2010.
So my defense is prove it. First, I have to prove there's a murder, right?
Brown is a brilliant showman, known for making arguments in court that could fit into the final scene of a primetime legal drama.
We've got blood,
right?
We've got shell casings.
Correct.
We've got a dog that was shot.
Correct.
But we don't have a body.
Correct.
And what does that add up to for you?
A case of circumstantial evidence.
When it comes to representing accused killers, Brown has been around the block. He titled his memoir, The Devil's Defender, to highlight a career spent arguing on behalf of defendants he considered evil. His client list included one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, Ted Bundy, who said he had murdered 30 people.
Bundy once told me that he knew he was evil. Now, most sociopaths don't say that. Now, I don't see any of that in Michiel at all.
Brown argued instead that Mark Stover represented the evil in this case, not his client.
I think somebody asked Michael recently whether Michael thought Mark Stover was evil, and Michael said no, not all parts of him, which I thought was a very gracious thing for Michael to say under the circumstances. But I think there were parts of Mark Stover that were very evil. You know, when you start treating people as objects, which is what Stover did, and particularly with Linda, then I think that crosses over.
In court, they planned to make the case that Michael shot Mark in self-defense. The trial started in September 2010, less than a year after Mark Stover was killed.
It did have an interesting cast of characters. Everybody appeared at first blush to be very, very good citizens.
That's Judge Mike Rickert.
The case became very sensationalized, much to my chagrin. That makes things more difficult for us as we're trying to ensure that both sides get a fair shake and that justice is actually done.
Judge Rickert said this turned out to be one of the stranger cases he had presided over.
The trial actually lasted 4 weeks. The investigation lasted for the year prior to that. And the twists and the turns in the plot and the details of this case just kept changing.
Witnesses included detectives, some of Mark's former employees, and Michael's second wife, Jennifer Thompson, who told jurors that Michael said, "If police saw what was in the back of my car, I'd go to prison for life." But it was Michael himself who played the leading role in this trial when he took the stand.
Mr. Brown, you got a new witness for us?
Yes, Mr. Oakes.
Mr. Oakes, come on up.
His defense attorney, John Henry Brown, wanted Michael to explain why he had to defend himself.
He came around the corner with a gun in one hand, and he pointed the gun at me, and the look on his face, he didn't say anything.
Okay. How close is it to you?
I'm inside the washroom, he's right at the doorway, and he's just inside the hallway, 3 feet maybe.
Okay. What happens then?
I can't remember if I lunged and he shot. We tangled and I got shot.
Remember, Detective Dan Louveris said it was highly improbable that Michael could shoot Mark in self-defense immediately after being shot himself, even if he was wearing a bulletproof vest. So Brown asked Michael to reenact the shooting to show that it was possible.
Would you mind taking off your coat? I'm not sure how it works, so why don't you put this on the way you had it on, right?
Brown asked Michael to put on a Kevlar vest like the one he wore on October 28, 2009. Brown's co-counsel, Corbin Valles, stood in as Mark Stover.
Mr. Valles is larger than Mr. Stover, as far as you know?
He's taller.
Valles held up his left hand and stuck out his pointer finger to act like he was aiming a gun at Michael.
So Mr. Valles is holding the gun out. He's fired at you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Michael lunged at Valles, grabbed his left arm, and tackled him to the ground.
I don't think we were expecting that.
The aggressive move startled the courtroom into a big laugh.
Are you all right?
I'm fine. My finger wasn't loaded.
Michael took off the vest and then walked back to the witness stand.
Can I take this off?
That was amazingly fast, Mr. Oakes. Is that the way you did that?
That's how I was trained. Can I take this off?
Yes, please take that off.
I asked prosecutor Rich Wyrick why a bullet hole in Michael Oakes' vest wasn't convincing to authorities. He explained the location of the bullet was suspicious.
It appeared to have gone in very close to exactly straight, exactly in the middle of the bulletproof vest. And
which suggests what to you?
Well, what it suggested to us is that it was done either before or after the event as somewhat of an alibi.
Back on the stand, Michael eventually came to the dramatic moment everyone was waiting for. He was finally going to disclose where he put Mark's body.
You somehow get Mr. Stover's body into the station wagon.
That's what I did then. I picked him up, which was very difficult, and carried him out to the back of the station wagon and laid him there. And I had that kitchen towel that I had grabbed, and I threw that in with him. Oh, when I picked him up and the gun fell down on the floor, I just put it in his vest pocket.
Michael then testified he later drove to that Grange Hall parking lot nearby where he struggled to transfer Mark's body.
I tried to move him to my car, but it was too heavy. And so I used the plastic that was in the back of the rig.
His rig?
Yes, in the back of the station wagon, and slid it underneath of him and was able to then slide him across to my car.
After meeting with his ex-wife, Jennifer Thompson, in Everett, Washington, he drove back to Anacortes to move Mark's now empty station wagon.
And it was still just sitting there, and I was blown away. I thought for sure it would have been like some big crime scene investigation.
Michael said he then drove the station wagon about 2 miles to the nearby Swinomish Casino parking lot. Michael then walked back to his own car, where Mark's body was covered up in the back.
You leave it there?
Yep.
Michael told the courtroom he then decided to dispose of the body because he didn't think investigators would believe his story.
I'm walking away from Mr. Stover's car. I see some kind of a boat in the water just near there.
Michael said he then drove down to a dock at the far end of that casino's vast parking lot.
And I got my car as close to that as possible and muscled him out and dropped him in the water.
According to Michael, he then dropped Mark's body into the Swinomish Channel, which flows into the Padilla Bay near Anacortes.
Was the gun with him?
His gun?
His gun?
His gun was in his pocket still of his vest.
After you did that, what did you do?
I threw some other stuff like the plastic in the water. And I smelled blood. I'm pretty sensitive to the smell of blood. I smelled blood. And I couldn't see, it was dark. And so I started throwing things out of the car into the water that were in the back. I had some stuff, the plastic and a piece of carpet from his car. And then some other items that were there.
He then headed to Linda's home in Winthrop.
I arrived there, I don't remember now, it was dark. I had to stop to throw up a couple times. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Okay. We see your tape of when you get to Linda's, so that'd be accurate, right?
Yes.
When you got to Linda's, did you tell her anything about what had happened?
I just said I had a really bad day.
What time was that?
It was late. It was late. I don't remember now. I was exhausted.
But when the prosecution cross-examined Michael, they zeroed in on some inconsistencies in his story. Here's Skagit County Prosecutor Rich Wyrick.
You indicated that when you were at the Summit Park Range, body was too heavy to move from car to car. So you had to slide it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on 2 other occasions, you were able to just pick the body up and walk it down, go out, and I think you described a dilapidated dock and toss it in the water.
Yes.
And on another occasion, you were able to just pick it up and toss it into the back of Mr. Stover's car.
Pick up and toss, I think would be your words, but yes, I was able to pick him up.
Why was it too heavy at the Summit Park Range?
Because it's a station wagon, I couldn't stand up. You have to lean over to lift something, and I can't do that.
Detectives searched the waters behind the casino with a submersible camera and found nothing. While court was in recess, I asked Michael if he was telling the truth.
Police have searched that area. They have not found a gun. They have found no skeletal remains. Is that really where you dropped the body?
Absolutely, yes.
No matter where he may have disposed the body, I pressed him more.
What do you say to those who suspect that you disposed of the body because you wanted to dispose of the evidence? That if people could see Mark Stover's body, maybe there's a bullet hole in the back of the head. Maybe they would have seen that he was shot in the back, not in the front. Maybe you were trying to cover up a murder.
Well, I understand that feeling. I really do. And I hope that the body is recovered because it will exactly corroborate my story, 100%.
After he was cross-examined, Michael watched the woman he loved, the heiress, the person at the center of Mark Stover's rage, Linda Opdyke, raise her hand.
Could you please state your name for the record and spell your last name?
Linda Opdyke, spelled O-P, D as in David, Y-C-K-E.
Did you choose to violate your attorney's advice and speak to the prosecutor and testify in this trial?
Yes, I did.
Why did you change your mind?
Because I felt this was an important part of the story that I could tell about a dangerous stalking situation, and if there's any information that I could offer up, I wanted to do so.
But Linda wasn't there just to defend Michael. She told me she also wanted to defend herself and her father.
It's heart-wrenching enough to be dealing with what us as a family are dealing with Michael, let alone seeing my family attacked. Is just another level of, I feel, victimization and randomly going after anybody with no reason for anything and to do a smear campaign.
Here's Skagit County Prosecutor Rosemary Kaholakula questioning Linda.
You continue to have romantic feelings, intimate feelings toward Mr. Oakes and vice versa.
Yes.
And in fact, I think that you said that in our interview last week, is that you loved him, correct?
I don't recall if I said that or not, but I do. Yes.
When Mr. Oakes was arrested, you did what you could to find him a lawyer, correct?
Yes.
She asked about what help Linda provided Michael after his arrest.
And you made some phone calls, took some notes, tried to figure out who the best lawyer for him would be, correct?
Yes.
In addition to that, you figured out what his bail amount was?
No, I had nothing to do with that.
Michael somehow managed to pay $250,000 for him to get out on bail. Linda insisted she didn't cover that cost. Michael's defense attorney, John Henry Brown, told me the Opdykes weren't paying his fee either.
Is Linda Opdyke paying for Michael Oakes' defense?
No, God, I wish she was. I really wish she was. No.
There's no money going through a third party to Oakes' family and back to you guys?
No, I'm going to lose my shirt on this case, actually, just like many of my other cases.
Back at trial, the prosecution showed no sympathy in its cross-examination of Linda.
Now, it's correct, isn't it, that throughout the investigation of this case, you've been concerned about your own potential legal liability in this case?
Yes.
The prosecutor even suggested Linda's support for Michael may have been an attempt to protect herself.
You don't have to worry about Mr. Stover now, do you?
It appears to be that case.
And in that sense, the defendant helped you out, correct?
No.
Isn't it true that if this is a case of self-defense, it gets you off the hook, too?
What do you mean by that?
You indicated you were concerned about your own potential liability in this case. If a jury were to find that this was self-defense, you wouldn't have any more liability either, would you?
I have no liability in this case.
The prosecution also argued that Linda had no evidence Mark continued to stalk her after his arrest.
You made a report on December 5th, 2008. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you indicated at that time that you believed that you saw Mr. Stover's vehicle in the area. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Kahola Kula pointed out that Linda was never able to identify Mark in this incident or several others she reported in 2008 and 2009.
Nobody was able to respond in time.
So the answer would be no?
That is correct.
Prosecutors also called Mark Stover's fiancée, Teresa Vox Michael, to testify. Their engagement was used as evidence Mark was moving on. I talked to Teresa in 2010.
In the weeks before he died, was he a happy man?
He was. He was like a kid. He was joking with me all the time, and he was always fun, when we were on the phone.
But Teresa claimed there was still a dark presence in his life, his ex-wife Linda. She said that Mark described Linda as a vengeful ex who wouldn't leave him alone and often took him to court.
He just was very troubled about the way things had gone.
And what did he believe the end game was with her?
I don't know that he thought there was a goal. He just couldn't believe that things wouldn't stop. The legal battles, the accusations. He knew his life was in danger.
But Michael's attorneys alleged just the opposite. They argued Mark threatened and stalked Michael, and that he only killed Mark to defend himself and his family. They insisted Mark and Michael met multiple times. The defense even claimed to have a witness who said Mark mentioned seeing Michael and Linda at a Costco months before the shooting. But the judge ruled there was no way to verify the witness's story. Soon, Michael would learn his fate. After more than 50 witnesses and more than 700 exhibits, the jury began to deliberate. They took 4 days before they reached a verdict.
All rise, please.
Linda sat next to Michael's mom and tried to comfort Michael's daughters as they all waited. Mark Stover's niece, Julia Simmons, was there to represent his family. Who did this jury believe?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Glenn Oakes, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree, premeditated murder as charged.
Michael was found guilty of first-degree murder. He turned and hugged his daughters. At his sentencing, his mother, Corey Oakes, pleaded with the judge to have mercy, that her son never wanted to hurt Mark.
He wanted to reason with him. I believe that with all my heart. And I think it's grieving him. I know it is. He would never want to take a life. He is not a murderer. And none of us would want that for Mark.
Mark's family felt differently. His sister, Victoria Simmons, asked the judge to give Michael the maximum sentence.
Why was he murdered? Where is my brother? When will I be able to lay him to rest in a dignified manner? Years from now, Michael Oakes will be released. He will have paid his debt to society. I will still be serving the life sentence that Michael Oakes gave me.
Judge Mike Rickert sentenced Michael to the maximum amount of time in prison, 26.5 years.
The absurdity of the actions that you took on that day are beyond belief, and I've got to tell you, there's large parts of your story I just flat do not believe and never will.
There was finally an ending to this emotional saga gone horribly wrong. But there will always be lingering questions about what really happened on October 28, 2009.
But the pieces don't fit very well in this case after 4 weeks. And to a certain degree, I almost have more questions now than I had when we picked the jury.
This case of Mark Stover has been defined by an infinite loop of suspicion between three people. Linda said she feared Mark. Mark said he feared Linda. And Michael said he too eventually feared Mark. Each person claimed the other was threatening their life until that morning in October proved that one of them was right. With no more new information surrounding the crime, law enforcement closed the case in 2012. Linda's father, Wally Opdyke, died in 2018 at age 81 at his home in Whitefish, Montana. The Chateau San Michel winery, the largest in Washington, remains open today and thriving. The Opdykes sold Kickett Island too. It's now a park that belongs to the Swinomish tribe. It's open to the public for hiking, but there are no dogs allowed. After Michael went to prison, his daughter April Oakes said each of her siblings went to stay at a different home. April lived with Linda until she was 17 and said Linda has remained a big part of the family's lives. Linda last sat for an interview in 2011.
It's incomprehensible to me that that's a verdict that would have come back.
Michael's first instinct was to turn to all of you.
Yes.
And to hold his family.
Yes. He definitely loves his children and loves me, and I know that's his biggest concern is for all of us, and our biggest concern is him. So we're all supporting each other and just sticking by one another.
Michael appealed his case to no avail. He is incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. In a call from prison in April 2025, Michael said he expects to get out in 2035, when he is 67 years old. He blamed one of his appellate attorneys failing to file an appeal on time for his inability to keep challenging his sentence in court. Today, there is a website, freeoaks.com, that advocates for Michael's freedom. His family sent us documents from Michael's appeal. In 2017, the Oakes family hired an oceanographer to study where Mark's body may have ended up in the water and believe that the police missed a spot where the current could have moved Mark. Detective Dan Luvera said the police searched the channel multiple times and even used underwater cameras. We asked Michael about his current relationship with Linda Opdyke. He said he wanted to respect her privacy. After Mark's death, Teresa, the woman who had hoped to marry Mark, took his dog Ding into her home. Ding had miraculously survived being shot.
And when she came to be with me, she slept on my bed. She went to work with me. I took her everywhere with me. And in petting her, I found a tumor about this big. Well, it grew and grew, and she was in tremendous pain. So I had to have her put down.
And was that tough? Because Ding was a link to Mark.
Oh, she was my last link to him.
Teresa told me that Ding was buried with a custom headstone. She hopes a day will come when they can give Mark the proper burial he deserves.
I would love to see him buried with a ring on his finger.
Mark's sister, Victoria Simmons, said she will never rest until her brother's remains are found.
I need to find him, and I just can't let that go. Being a woman of faith, I know that everything done in secret will eventually be shouted from the housetops. You cannot plead the fifth in heaven, and the truth will come out eventually.
A celebrity dog trainer, an heiress, and her bodyguard, 3 lives ruined by a triangle of jealousy, fear, and rage. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill, The Dog Trainer, The Heiress, and The Bodyguard, produced by Sony Music Entertainment. I'm your host, Peter Van Sant. Judy Tigard is the executive producer of 48 Hours. Original reporting by 48 Hours producers Ryan Smith and Liza Finley. Jamie Benson is the senior producer for Paramount Audio, and Maura Waltz is the senior story editor. Recording assistance from Alan Pang and Reginald Bazile. Special thanks to Paramount Podcast Vice President Megan Marcus. It is written and produced by Alex Schumann. Stephanie Serrano is our editor. Our executive producer is Shira Morris. Our associate producer is Zoe Culkin. Theme and original music composed by Hansdale Shee. Cedric Wilson is our sound designer and mixed the episodes. We also use music from APM and Epidemic Sounds. Fendel Fulton is our fact checker. Our production manager is Tamika Balance-Kolasny. I'm Peter Van Sant. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to rate and review. It helps more people find it and hear our reporting. Follow and listen to Trained to Kill and other 48 Hours podcasts on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.